Hey everyone, my name is Ernesto and today we're going to have a look at the dialogue system I created for my game. We're going to recreate a simplified version of it, and if you're interested I can also do like an advanced version that then also uses the new input system and has like a different way of triggering it and like a bunch more stuff to it. But today we're going to have a look at how to create that simplified version, and I'm actually preparing a script, so hopefully I don't ramble on too much today. So the system consists of three different parts. The dialogue itself that we're going to feed into a dialogue interaction, and then the dialogue interaction is going to call a dialogue manager that displays the actual dialogue on screen. And that is because the dialogue itself is just a data container that contains all the contents of our dialogue. Then the dialogue interaction is what actually triggers that dialogue, or maybe, a series of dialogues or dialogues depending on what items a player has. You can expand that depending on what you need. And the UI manager, or the dialogue UI manager, is just supposed to display what we give it. It's not supposed to actually have any logic about what dialogue gets triggered. It's just supposed to figure out what gets displayed and what do we do with the display text. How is it displayed? Do we have like an image for the character? Is that supposed to be animated? Is that supposed to change depending on the sentence? Stuff like that. All the UI related stuff is going to be contained in that manager. And I think it's very important that you really contain separate parts in different scripts so that these parts don't like intersect, and you have to think after you finished your system, wait, where did I put this one thing with the UI? Was that in there or in there? No, if you've separated these parts correctly, then you will always know all the UI stuff is going to be contained in the UI manager. You don't have to search for anything, and that's very clean. So that's the way I wanted to do it. Okay, so we are now in a completely blank Unity project. I'm using Unity, what it's saying up there, at 21.3.21f, but this should work in any version that is pretty recent, so I think even like 2019 upwards. If we're going to the more advanced system and we're using the new input system, then obviously your project has to support the new input system, but this is quite basic and should work in every vaguely new Unity version. Obviously, if you're having issues, that could be many different things, so please write any questions in the comments below and I will try to answer anything I can. I haven't really changed anything in this Unity project. I am slightly above some stuff, but it's just the standard stuff that gets imported when you open a new project. I'm on URP, but this should also work in the standard built-in pipeline, as we're actually not using any pipeline stuff. We're not doing anything graphical. And I've also changed the layout a tiny bit, so I have the inspector on the right side and my project window is this one column version instead of the two column version. But that's not really, I haven't really done anything. It just might look a little different. If you want to change your project window from like this two column to one column, it's this tiny 3 red dots. I am above those. Shit. Okay, the project window has 3 tiny buttons, 2 tiny buttons with 3 tiny dots in the top right corner. And once you pop that out, you can select the 1 column or 2 column layout. And I just prefer the 1 column one, but that is just a side note. All right, so we want to start by creating our dialog object. So we need an object or a script that contains all the logic for a generic dialogue. And to do that, first of all, I'm going to create a folder. It's always good if you start a new project, just start off by actually putting things in the folder that they are supposed to go in, so that you will actually find them again. Or if you work with someone else, it's much easier for them to find what you were working on if it's in a folder that makes sense. So I've created a new folder that's called scripts, and we're going to create a new C# script called dialog. And let me just create a new folder. That was not a new folder. And call that let Unity recompile the script. A dialog system. And drag our dialog script in there. So now, you never have to think about, where is my dialog system? It obviously is under scripts and under dialog system. And then double click to open it up. I have a Visual Studio Code installed. It's my go-to editor, but you can obviously use any code editor you want. This one gets installed automatically, I think, by Unity. So if you go into your package manager, you can see what version you've got installed. You might need to update it. If you've got this tiny arrow on something, you can update it in order for it to work. And if it's still not working, you might want to look into your preferences. And under external tools, you can select your external script editor. In my case, it is Visual Studio Code. And I can open it up. And this is what our standard script looks like. I can somehow, I think, make that bigger. I just can't remember how. View. Can I somehow full screen? That's also not bad. I just want to zoom in. Control++. Okay, I didn't remember that. Like this? All right, I think you can now see it a little bit better. Okay, so this is supposed to be all logic that, or not even logic, all data that is needed to create a basic dialog. So we can delete some of the stuff here at the top. I've actually prepared this on my other monitor so that I don't screw this up. All right. And because we only need data, we don't actually want this to contain any logic, we can make this into a scriptable object. So we delete mono behavior from this class and we type scriptable object. And a scriptable object is basically just a data container. So this is not supposed to contain any logic at all, it's just containing data. And we can add a command above our class that's influencing the entirety of that class. And we type create asset menu, and that allows us to create an object of type dialog in our project folder. That allows us to just create a bunch of dialogues, put them in our file structure, and access them from there, which is very handy. And we need to give that asset menu a file name. So what is, a new file supposed to be called by default? In our case, that is new dialog. And we also need a menu name, or that might also be actually optional, I'm not very sure. And that is supposed to be the name that shows up if you right-click in the editor. We will see that in a second. And we can choose something like dialog system. And if you want to have a subfolder, if you have multiple different objects that connect to the dialog system, for example, you have a dialog and maybe you have a character sheet with like important parts of a character, then you might want to have multiple things within that dialog system folder. And to do that, we just type a slash and then we type what our object is supposed to be called like within that menu. In our case, that's just dialog. And we can already test that out. If we just minimize it, wait for Unity to reload our packages, we can create a new folder, call that dialogs, or I'll just mistype that, dialogs, and create now a new dialog system dialog. It's a new option that showed up just by right-clicking above folder. All your custom scriptable objects are going to show up right at the top, which is very, very handy. And then you just click on new dialog. You can see that, can you see it? I might be slightly above it. The object is called new dialog by default, but we might type something like dialog 01. And on the right side in the inspector, we can now see that our dialog 01 dialog object has nothing to change because our script doesn't contain anything yet. And this part is actually quite easy. You can delete everything that's in here because we don't need any methods, actually. We just need data. And what data do we need? We need a name for our character, so a public string, char name. So that's the name of the character we are going to interact with. We need a public sprite, char sprite. So that's the image that's going to display it when you talk with a character. You might also, you might put anything in here. You can also leave it out if you don't want any image to appear when you're talking to a character. In my case, I want to. And then it's going to be a little more difficult because we need a text that's actually going to be displayed. So a string that's going to contain all our sentences. And because we don't just want this to be one sentence, because if we save this right now, we're just going to have, one sentence. We need an array of sentences. So you add like brackets behind the string, and now we have an array of sentences that we can add stuff to. And if you go back into Unity and let it reload, you can see we have a bunch of stuff here. We have a char name. We can call that Thomas. Thomas, and we can have a sprite. I actually prepared one from my original game. So I have the fox just imported, and we have an array of sentences. And if I just, click the plus button a few times, you can see that we have now 3 like tiny things. And the issue is when you want to write bigger sentences or bigger parts to a dialogue, this is not a lot of space to write anything, because if I just keep typing some bullshit, you can see it kind of just disappears into nowhere, and it's very difficult to actually see what you wrote if it's a little bit bigger. And there's actually something we can do to solve that. We can add in big brackets before we actually define the string. We can add well, we don't need that much space. That was the wrong button. We can add a so-called text area, which is going to increase the size we have in the editor for those strings. And then you define a minimum for that size and a maximum. So 3 and 10, for example. And if we now save that and go back into Unity, you can see that we have much more space to work with. And if I press enter a few times, you can even see that it expands. And you can type anything you want into that. And so if you need a lot of space, you can also write 100 in here. That is not going to be necessary, but you can do it, right? And that is actually all the stuff we need to do within the dialog script. We now have everything we need to actually make a dialogue. So let's write a few sample sentences. Hey there, I'm Thomas. How's it going? All right, that's that's not very inspired, but I think it's fine. All right, so we can move on to a new script, and that will be our dialog interaction. So the thing that actually triggers the dialog interaction. How you trigger it depends on what your game needs. I'm just going to show you like a very simple version today. You might change that, and if I do an advanced version of this, I can also show you how I do it actually in my game. Okay, so we call that dialog interaction. Our new script. Wait for Unity to, recompile. And now let me quickly open that up. This is actually going to be a mono behavior. We don't need the system.collection thingies, but we actually do need our start method. So you can get rid of the update. We don't have anything that changes per frame, so we don't need it. The first thing that we need is a reference to our dialog. So a public dialog. So this is going to be the dialog that we trigger once the dialog interaction triggers. Or it's going to be the dialog that we give to the Dialog UI manager. Then we need a boolean, so a check if our dialog is already active. So if you, for example, have a character standing somewhere in a field, you don't want that dialog to trigger twice if it's already triggered. That can lead to some very wonky behavior, so we're just going to check if that dialog is already active, then we don't want to interact anymore. So we're just going to call that dialog active. And we need a reference to our dialog UI interaction that doesn't exist yet. So I will just leave it out and we will add that in a second. Yeah, we also do need the start method a bit later. And we actually only need one method to get this started. So we add a public void start dialog. So this will be our method to actually start the dialog. And where you call this from depends on how you want to trigger your dialog. And then we check with an if statement if our dialog is active. We don't want that to be the case, so add an exclamation mark before that boolean. And this way, everything that is inside this if statement only triggers if dialog interactive is not active or not enabled. So the first thing we want to do is actually set that to true. So once that triggers once, we set it to true so that it doesn't trigger again. And then we need a reference to our dialog UI, so we can just do a double slash to add a comment and add something like add UI part. You know, we need UI and we need in our start method, we need add UI integration. So that is missing right now. And that is pretty much everything we can do here right now. It doesn't really do anything yet. It's quite simple. So go ahead and create a new script, call that Dialog UI Manager. That is definitely the biggest script we're going to need today. And we can get rid of the system.collection thingies again. And don't need those. We do need the start method again. And oh, I don't think we need the update. Wait, I'm an idiot. We actually do need those references up there. Okay. So now we need a bunch of stuff we don't actually have created yet, but let me just go through that one by one. So if you think about it, we have a kind of dialog object that we're going to display in UI space. And we don't want that to be active all the time, because then you'd have this big box at the bottom of the screen the entire time. That's not very optimal. So we need a reference to an object we can enable and disable depending on if the dialog is active or not. So create a new public game object, call that dialog box or dialog object or anything like that. Then we need a reference to like some kind of small graphic that displays like, okay, the sentence is over, you can continue to the next one. This might be a button. In this case, it will be a button that you can press to get to the next sentence, but it might also just be a graphic to press a certain button on the keyboard or on your controller. But we do need something, so add a new game object, call that next sentence image or next sentence object. Let's call that object actually. It's always good to use very descriptive names so that anyone, even if someone comes new into your project, knows what the fuck that is. Sorry, I'm cursing a lot. Then we need a new reference to an image, and now we need actually something, we need to use something that's not in here yet. For some reason that wants to use as the Visual Studio Editor, we don't want that. We need the Unity engine, I can't write, engine.ui, that gives us access to all of Unity's UI components, and that includes the image type. And you call that like character image. So that's a reference to the actual UI part of our character image, where we're going to put our defined sprite from the character into that image object. And then we almost have all UI elements. We just need a reference to the actual text. And we're going to have a name text and a sentence text. So let's create a TMP Pro. So that's a Text Mesh Pro. Unity's, yeah, it's not the default text still for some reason, but it's the only text you should ever use. It's going to be installed with Unity by default. You might need to update it the first time you use it. But this is the text we're going to use. It's crisper than the original one. I think it's also more performant. I'm not very sure about that. And we make a new object for that like this. You can also do it by including the Text Mesh Pro namespace at the top. So you can also include TMP Pro, TM Pro, whatever, Text Mesh Pro, and then you don't need that. Then you can just write TMP_text. And we need a dialog, or like, let's call that sentence text. So that's the text that is actually going to display our sentence. And then we need a public TMP text for the name of the character. So character name text. All right. So that's everything that's public. That's going to, we're going to need to connect that in the inspector to the UI part that we're going to create in a second. All right, and we're going to have to add a bunch of more stuff, but let's keep it like that for now. And the most important part of this object right now is that we kind of want to access this object from anywhere, because if we don't do that, you kind of have to put a reference to this manager into every dialog interaction. That might get very tedious. And there are certain situations where you don't actually know where the UI manager is. It might be in a different scene or might not be accessible for that specific dialog interaction. And there's a way we can fix that so that we can access this manager from anywhere. And that's called a singleton. And that's quite easy to do. We just type public static dialog UI manager instance, and this is going to kind of make sure that there's ever only one instance of this object existing. And because we know that there's only one, we can access that instance from anywhere. We just need to add an awake method that is called right at the start of a game, even before our start method. We don't even need a private one. And we type instance is equal to this. So we assign this instance variable to this instance, well, to the script, to the instance of the script. So we make sure that this instance is this. That's a little hard to grasp maybe. But if we write this piece of code, then we make sure that only one version of the script will ever exist, or can ever exist. And because we know that now, we can go back into our dialog interaction and go at the top and type dialog UI manager, dialog UI or something. And we can go into our start method and just say dialog UI is equal to dialog UI manager dot instance. So we assign our cached version to the instance of the dialog UI manager, because we know that there can ever only be one. We make sure that it is the one we created. All right. So that's the first part started or finished. We now start by creating a method to actually display our dialog. So I forgot the void. So public void start dialog. And to start that is going to be called by our dialog interaction. So we need to give it a dialog that is going to be filled in by our dialog interaction. And now we have an issue because we need some sort of reference to all the sentences that are going to be displayed while we have one specific dialog running. And to do that, we're just going to make an array of sentences. Oh wait, no wait, actually not going to use an array. We're going to use a different type of, well, group, we're going to use a queue. And the difference between a queue and an array is that a queue only ever gives us the first item or first object within that queue, and we can kind of dequeue it and let us give it the next object within that queue. So it really just works like a regular queue at like an airport would work. You ever only get the one that is standing right at the end. So the first one that got into the queue is also the first one that's going to get out of the queue. And it's a queue of type string, so we want to put strings in our queue, and we call that sentences. And when we start our dialog, we want to first of all make sure that there's nothing left from a different dialog within our queue. So we do sentences.clear to completely delete everything that's within it. And actually, I forgot something. Once we instantiate this, once we start our game, we need to. Well, we don't actually need to do it here. We can do it up here as well. We need to make sure that this is instantiated, or is instantiated the right word for it? I think so. I think also the few dots under here, it's just telling us to make it read only. We want to make sure that it's active, and you do that by creating a new object of that type. Otherwise, you can't use it. All right. So now, after we've created an object of type sentences, and we cleared that, we want to make sure to enqueue all the sentences within our dialog into that sentences queue. We do that by cycling through that, starting a for each loop, and we do want to pass into that every sentence. So we do for each string sentence in our dialog that's got passed into it .sentences. So for each sentence within our sentences array, we want to do sentences.enqueue our sentence. And that's pretty much it. That's everything we need to do. Let me take a sip of water. So now we have all our sentences in the right order within our sentences queue. And now we only actually need to assign all of our different stuff to the dialog specific stuff. So we need to grab our character name text, and we need to assign that. We actually need to make sure to access the text in that text object. It's a little bit confusing. To our dialog.char name. And we need to assign our, what did I call it? Character image to our dialog.char sprite. That doesn't work because we need to access the sprite component. It should work like this. So it's a little bit difficult to understand at first, but you basically have the object of the type, for example, TMP text, but then you need to access the actual text component of that. And it's the same with the image object that contains a sprite component. All right. Then we need to make sure that we, enable our dialog box. So make sure that you can actually see something. And then we need a new method that's going to be called like something like display next sentence to actually display that sentence on screen. We don't have that yet. We will do that now. So let's add a void display next sentence. And first of all, we want to make sure that we have sentences. We can do that by counting everything in that queue. And if it's 0, then we would just want to, call a method like endDialog. And then we want to return from this method. Return in this case means that we don't actually execute any code beyond this return statement. Then we grab a sentence you know, our current sentence, that's going to be our sentences.dq. So it's the first sentence within that sentence queue. And actually we need a global cache of that. So we're going to create a string current sentence up at the top still. I can't write sentence. Yes. And we're going to say current sentence is equal to our sentence. You could also actually, why did I do it like this? We don't actually have to do it like this. We can just like get rid of this. Oh, wait, let's get rid of that and just do current sentence is equal to sentences.dq. That's a little bit shorter. All right. So that's everything we need to display it, but this would just make the sentence appear as like a block. We can try that, but let me quickly write the end dialog method first, so it stops, you know, showing it as an error. End dialog, like this. You know, it's not going to be doing that much. It's just going to say dialog was.setActive false. You know, we're just disabling our dialog box again. This should show our dialog, you know, quite easy, but it's not actually going to do much more. But we can try this out like this. We actually need to create a bunch of UI stuff first, obviously. Oh no, I'm at 30 minutes already. Oh shit. Okay, let's do it quickly. Let's do UI. Let's create a new canvas. Let's add our Dialog UI manager to that canvas. Let's create a new empty, call that dialog box. Let's create an image below that, call that like, I don't know, background. Let's move that down to the bottom, you know, no, that's enough. Just like expand it, you know, to look like a dialog box. That's fine, I guess. Like something like this. Give it like, I don't know, black, gray. You can decide anything you want. You can also do it, make it black and then, you know, reduce the opacity and some shit. Create a new UI text mesh pro, call that a sentence text. Move it down. Now you need to change into the scene view as well, because you can see this yellow border is defining the border of this text. Let's just, you know, grab that and make it bigger so that some text actually fits it. Then copy and paste this object, move it up a bit, scale it down to create a char name text. Maybe reduce the font size of the text to like 24 so that the name of the character is actually a bit bigger. Create a new UI image, call that char image. Select our, you know, our test one. We can also select some random stuff you have lying around in your project, doesn't really matter. Maybe just lock the scale over here with a tiny chain and then increase that scale so that it scales uniformly. You can also check the preserve aspect checkbox within the image component in order to make sure that it doesn't scale all weirdly. And then you have something like this. Very, very simple. But we're at 30 minutes and I want to, you know, I kind of want to, yeah, you know what I mean. Actually, for my specific image, we get to, you know, reduce, go there, make that go down a bit. All right. So now we can go back to our, let me just close all of that. Go back to our Dialog UI manager. I can also change that to 16:9. And now we can fill out these specific points. So drag the dialog box into the dialog box. We're actually missing that still, so leave it empty. Grab the image, put it into the image, sentence into the sentence, character name into character name. All right. And then create a new object, make it a button, move that button somewhere a button would go. That would be a next button. Open that button up, to get to the text, call that next, make it fat. That's pretty much it. Grab that button, put it into the next button, maybe rename it, call that next button. And there we go. We have everything in here. You can also just disable that now, because by default we don't want to see it. We're just missing one thing now, because we don't have any way to actually trigger this yet. So create a new button, call that kind of like a dialog trigger. Maybe make it, you know, like a bit bigger so we can actually see it. Call the text something like dialog, trigger dialog, make it fat again, so we can actually see what's going on. And then create a new empty object, call that something like dialog interaction, and drag our dialog interaction script on that. So that's asking for a dialog. No, we have created that already, so drag our dialog 01 into that. And now the only thing we need to do is connect our trigger dialog button to our interaction. So go back into the interaction script, create a new public button. You know, it will maybe add the Unity engine.ui namespace for you, otherwise you need to add it yourself. Call that dialog trigger button. And that won't do anything by itself. We need to actually assign that method to the onClick event on that button. There are multiple ways to do it. We're going to do it in script today by doing dialog trigger button.onClick.add listener. So this adds a listener for that onClick event. In our case, that's going to be start dialog. So start dialog is going to be called once the onClick event triggers, and the onClick event triggers once we click it. You know, that's pretty simple. Now we just need to go into our start dialog method and actually add our dialog UI.start dialog method in here. That's going to ask for a specific dialog. So add our dialog in here and boom, bam, we are done. Hopefully. Let's hope that this will actually work. Let's drag our button in here and click play. And nothing is going to happen, but we can click this button now and our, you know, dialog box will appear. You can also see that, you know, our text doesn't really do anything yet, but the sprite changes and the name changes. And I can click this next button, but it doesn't do anything yet. All right, so we have progress, but our display next sentence really doesn't do anything yet, you know, because you can see that we save the current sentence, but we don't actually display it or anything. There's nothing going on. And to, you know, usually when you have dialogues, or often when you have dialogues, you have like a fun, neat little effect where the text doesn't appear, you know, immediately all at once, but you have that like effect where each little letter appears, you know, one by one on their own. And we're going to do that as well. It's quite simple. We just need to create an IEnumerator, which is also basically a function, but we can add some fun statements within that function that can delay stuff. And that is exactly what we want, because otherwise, you know, it kind of depends on your machine, but usually these normal methods are so fast that even if you would code it so that each letter would appear on their own, it would be so fast that you wouldn't be able to tell. So it's important that we have some way of delaying the appearance of the next letter, and that is done by an IEnumerator, so a coroutine is what that's also called. And we're going to call that type sentence, because that is exactly what that method is going to do. You can see that, you know, it's complaining because these types of methods, so these coroutines, need a certain return value applied, otherwise they're going to be very, very mad. So first of all, we're going to take our sentence text And we're going to make sure that it's empty. Otherwise, you will just add to an existing sentence from the last dialog, which we don't want. Then we're going to make sure by adding a new Boolean that we are typing, you know, is typing is equal to true. So we are typing now. And we now have to separate all of our chars that we have in our current sentence, so we can actually display them one by one. And we do that by creating a char array. So that's an array of chars created from our current sentence. Let's call that sentence chars, and that is equal to current sentence.toChar array. So that's creating an array out of our sentence string. And now we go through each and every char through a for each loop. So for each char, let's call that letter in sentence chars, we are going to do dialog text. Oh, that's just what I called it. Sentence text dot text is plus equals our letter. So we're adding our letter to the text. And then we do our fun delaying bit I just talked about. So we do yield return new wait 4 seconds. And this will actually wait real-time seconds before executing the next thing. And you can just hardcode something in here like 0.1 or something, that would work. But it is better to just create a public float like letter wait time that we can assign in the editor or in the inspector. And anyone will be able to assign that, so it's much more friendly for someone who might not code. So if you're working with someone who doesn't know shit about code and just wants to assign the stuff in the editor, this is much more friendly. And it's much easier to access and edit later on. This will be such a long video. Shit, dude, I thought I was going to finish this so much sooner. Okay. So once this is done, we want to do our next... What did I call that? Next sentence object. And we want to set that active. So we can now advance to the next sentence. Is typing is equal to false. And we have a certain, I think didn't add that yet. We have a certain Boolean, a new one, that is called like next sentence ready, that we can check to see if we can actually access the next sentence. In this case, yes. Next sentence ready, yeah. All right. Let me just quickly see if I forgot anything. Yes, we obviously need to start that. And, you know, calling an enumerator or a coroutine is a little bit different than, you know, calling a normal method, because we actually need to write start coroutine, and then we type sentence, and this will start this coroutine. You can make sure that it's not already running, you know, by typing stop all coroutines. This will stop every coroutine that is running in this script. If you have issues that, you know, you don't want to stop all of them, you just want to stop this specific one, you can also write stop coroutine and then type in your specific coroutine's name. This will also work. All right. I definitely still... Did I forget one? Yes, I forgot one. Because we do need a method that is going to be called by the button. You know, if we press that next sentence button, we need to call a method that is going to display that next sentence. We can just... I made a different one. I probably had my reasons. So let's write public void. I like grouping my methods so that all the public stuff is at the top and all the private stuff is at the bottom, but you can do it however you like. Show next sentence. And we want to check if we are ready to show the next sentence. Then, if that is the case, let me just quickly format that. We want to say next sentence ready is equal to false. False. Our next sentence object is also false again. So we disable that, and then we call display next sentence. Okay. And you might also do something like you can check if we are not ready and typing. You might add some logic for, you know, just skip the dialogue. Who needs it, right? So you can also maybe just add some logic in there to, oh yeah, that's my bad, to just skip it. Okay, 1 second, we'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Okay, so now we, I think, have everything we need to actually test this out. So let's go back into Unity, because my recording is still running. Check our canvas. We have everything in here. We just need to assign a wait time between letters. So let's set that to 0.1 seconds. We have everything we need in our trigger. We have everything we need in our interaction. We just need to, now if we enable our dialog box again, we need to actually disable this button, and I can show you a different version of triggering the on-click event of a button. So triggering a method that's going to happen once we click a button, and that is by actually just assigning it in the inspector on the button component. There's a big on-click thing here with an empty list. You can add a new, a new element to that list by clicking the little plus in the bottom right corner. And then we're just going to drag our canvas object in this object slot. And now on the no function dropdown, you can go to the Dialog UI manager, and then we're just going to search for show next sentence. So that's always going to show start this method once we click it. All right, then disable the dialog box again and click play. And now, once I select the trigger dialog, you can see the text appears, and it, takes some time to display each and every character. It takes a while, you might adjust the speed, and once I click next for the last time and there's no dialog left, it closes. And you can also see I can't trigger it again because in our dialog interaction we check if the dialog is active and it doesn't actually deactivate at any point. So if you'd want if you want this to be triggered multiple times, you'd have to somehow let this dialog interaction know that the dialog has stopped, which is definitely possible. For example, we can add an event up here in the Dialog UI manager and just subscribe to it in our dialog interaction to let it know our dialog stopped, so we can start it again. Let's do that real quick. I just need to remember how that works, because for some reason I always forget how the events work. I think it's just a public static event action. Is it written small? Action? Action. Let's call that on dialog end. It might not even need to be static. It might just be in public event action on dialog end. I think that is enough. And then we can go into our dialog interaction, and in our start method we can say dialog UI dot on dialog end. That is our event, and then we can add some sort of method to it, like stop dialog. that doesn't exist yet. We need to create it. So let's do void stop dialog. And in here we can say dialog active is equal to false. Let's try this out real quick. We should be able to start this dialog again now once we've finished it once. Let's see. So we click on the dialog box. Now we go through the sentences. We finish it, and then we can click it again, and nothing happens. All right. So let's troubleshoot this. What is the case? We can go onto our dialog interaction, click the three little buttons, three little dots in the top right, go into debug mode, and then we can see dialog active is still true. So it's not actually deactivated. And that is because if we go into our Dialog UI manager, we actually, we created this event, but we're not actually calling it at any point. That's my bad. So let's go into our end dialog method and add our on dialog end event to it. And then you just activate invoke. That's what it's called. And if you're not sure if anything is subscribed to it, events really don't like when they get executed and nothing cares about them, basically. So if you're not sure if there is anything subscribed to it, you can just add a question mark in front of it. That is, no, not in front of it here. Yeah, and a question mark behind it. And this will make sure that this event only executes if there is something subscribed to it. So if there is a method that actually happens once this invoke gets called, because otherwise you're going to get an error. If there's no method subscribed to it, it's going to complain to you. Okay, so let's try this again now. We're at an hour. Shit, dude, I thought this would take way less time, but I hope I did a good job at explaining, my thought process behind it. And then you can click it again and it starts again. All right, so it works. Good. This video is already way too long. I hope that I kind of explained myself well and that you could follow along. Please, this is my first tutorial of this size, so if you have any suggestions or any feedback in general, feel free to let me know. I was already astonished by the amount of feedback under the last video. So please keep that coming. If you have any additional ideas, please let me know. And yeah, I will see you again in the next video. Until then, have a great day. And yeah, until then, bye-bye.